Hey everyone, it's Christine with South Dakota Auto Dealers, South Dakota Trucking Association. This is Driveline Podcast, your official podcast of SDADA and SDTA. Today, I have a good friend of mine with me, joining me on this podcast, Ryan Budmayr. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here.
So Ryan is with Lawrence Schiller, here located in Sioux Falls, Vice President of PR and Business Development. We have worked together on a couple of campaigns, sometimes me in the background of just kind of kitchen cabinet stuff. And also we ran together the Holstone campaign, which had a lot of publicity, and we became fast friends. We've always known each other, but we became very close friends from that time on because we were probably talking
at least every day.
And sometimes 6 times a day.
Sometimes 6 times a day.
It was a lot. It was a lot. So anyways, I wanted to have you on today just to talk PR, what it looks like. You guys run campaigns. You're very active in some state government contracts from time to time. You're active in the community and around. So I want to have you on, and any association is important for us to be telling our story. And that's what you guys do. You storytell. You bring people in. So talk to me a little bit about what it's been like to work at Lawrence and Schiller, what your focus is, and just elaborate on that a little bit more.
You got it. So thank you for having me. This is fun. I said before we started, this is the first podcast I've ever actually been a part of. I've set up a lot of podcasts and worked with clients on podcasts, but never actually been on the other side of the table. So this is kind of fun.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Thank you.
We're friendly.
Yeah, no, this is not too scary. But like you mentioned, I'm at Lawrence and Schiller. A little bit about Lawrence and Schiller. So we turned 48 years old in May of this year. So been around almost 50 years. We are on our second generation of ownership. Craig Lawrence and Paul Schiller started it 1976. But we're a full service ad agency. We've got about 65 employees between Sioux Falls, and we've got an office in Minneapolis. I say full service, meaning there's a lot of agencies out there that kind of specialize or that have a niche sort of service that they offer. We sort of offer it all to clients. I think given where we're located in the Midwest, a lot of clients need full service. So whether that, anything from websites to placing media to public relations, we kind of do it all. What's unique about Lawrence and Schiller is we do a lot of research at LNS. So a lot of the campaigns that we do, we've got a consumer insights team that kind of helps set all of that up. And then we work in teams. So there's basically 3 mini agencies within the agency, allows us to sort of specialize with certain industries and get to know our clients a little bit better. So we do a lot of work, probably a quarter of our business is out in Pierre and state government. So we do work for Department of Social Services, Department of Health. We've done work for South Dakota Tourism, partner with them currently on some projects. I've done work in economic development, Department of Education, stuff like that. Do a lot of higher education work. But I kind of specialize more. I handle a few different accounts. I know you talked with Luke Lindbergh a while ago. South Dakota Trade's a client. We've kind of helped them from the beginning with all the logo stuff and then helping tell their story today. But I do a lot of political work. As you mentioned at the beginning, our work together on Holstone, I'm convinced we probably don't win that without you, Christine.
You're too
I'm dead serious on that.
It was a team. It was a team.
No question. You were a firebrand. You were you weren't afraid of anybody on that, and it was such a pleasure to have you on that.
It truly, like that issue. I remember we were at election party, watch party, and you and I were talking, and we both were like, "Whew."
I didn't see it coming.
We did the work, and then we slowly started seeing it going, and we looked at each other. We're like,
we might win this.
We might win this. Like we might win this. And I mean, it was just the timing of, a couple city councilors getting involved right at the end, and many, many other strategic things that you and I were really aligned, and we were like, full steam. And some people were like, ooh, we don't know if we want to do that. I'm a risk taker. And so I love that you embrace that with me. And sometimes you had to like simmer me down a little bit, but there was times where we're like, well, let's just hold that for a minute. We might use that again. But our strategy and I can't wait to work on another campaign with you again at some point, because we get each other. We're not afraid to tell each other no. But it was that representation that we had in that campaign with you and your company. Whew.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
I don't think we couldn't have put together a better team. I mean, you think about like from the agriculture sector, you think about South Dakota Soybean and Jerry Schmitz, who's just phenomenal, and his organization willing to step up in that. Your guys' organization willing to step up, and you willing to step up. The Sioux Falls Chamber getting involved the way that they did. No, it was a team effort. Again, I think the stars aligned pretty well, though. That was a tough campaign to win, and
very much.
I think I don't know that you could do it again.
Smiled.
Yeah, it was awesome.
We both just smiled because it was such a moment. Like we were like, we might actually do this.
Yeah.
Like it was such a moment, and like. It was busy.
Yeah.
It was very, very busy. And I know we all
crazy.
learned a lot about it. And I think it's made me a better spokesperson for my industries. And I see how you two have continued to grow. I mean, we're all growing, right?
Yep.
But how much you learned from it as well and have used that in your other campaigns.
Well, for sure. And I think also as a kid who grew up in Western South Dakota, obviously you as well.
Yeah.
We had ranches in Western South Dakota, right? We have horses, we have cows. I grew up around all of that, and was in Belfouche this last weekend riding horses.
Right.
But we don't have like big farms, and we don't have the corn and soybeans that they do in Eastern South Dakota.
Nope.
A lot of the pork processing, and so it was kind of a crash course for me in a lot of that world, and for LNS to be a part of that and kind of have that agriculture experience was incredibly valuable, because we've been involved in agriculture at LNS throughout the years, but I think over the last probably 3 to 5 years, we've gotten a lot more involved with our state's number one industry, and continue to tell that story and try to be helpful where it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what was interesting through that process too, I'm not going to name another company, but there was some pressure for me and others to pivot and say, we want to use a big DC company to come in. And I remember being on that Zoom. You weren't invited.
No.
And I remember going, wait a minute, this is a South Dakota issue. This is a company that understands South Dakota, understands the people. It's located right here, even in Sioux Falls, where the campaign was. And it was such a head scratcher to me. While I'm sure that company is fabulous and great, I couldn't see the point of saying, hey, sorry, Ryan, we're going to go a different direction. And so, looking a big reputable company in the face saying, hey, sorry, we're not choosing you. I'm sure it was tough for them to swallow, but also I think speaks volumes to your company that, you proved yourself and, quote, earned your keep.
Yeah. Well, again, there's a lot of ways that campaign could have gone off the rails. And I think that's one instance where I don't know what would have happened had the other company had partnered on it, but I just know the value of relationships, the value of sort of historical friendships, and also the work we've done together. But I can't thank you and the others. They sort of stuck up for LNS and said, hey, I think these guys are the right firm to help us here. And I think it worked out really well, and it was just a ton of fun. But just like any of them, it's so much fun to look back now. In the middle of it, it was it was tense.
Winning is fun.
Fun.
We could look back had we lost and learned from all of that as well. But just knowing in the early polls, we were down 70 points.
Yeah.
It was like a 30-70.
Yeah, it was at least 60-40, if not a little bit worse. So,
So and we won by a decent margin.
Yeah, it wasn't that close. No, and ultimately, I think, while the Holstone plant didn't move forward yet, or hasn't moved forward yet, I do kind of feel like, I've got a lot of friends at Poet. I think they've done a phenomenal thing for not only South Dakota, but the country, and energy independence and all of that. And so I think, the fact that the plant didn't move forward, hasn't moved forward yet, I kind of feel like is a victory for everybody. And so it was kind of a win-win, I hope.
Right.
And, we've been able to repair a lot of friendships at Poet. And like I said,
same.
Go to work on a lot of things. So
Yeah, no, same. And it was like after they decided to not come forward, we both were like, oh my gosh, we worked so hard and tirelessly on this issue and it was really, changing the rules in the middle of the game, the slippery slope, being pro-ag, pro-business. And I still would do the same thing over and over again.
Knowing the outcome.
But in the end, like the other side was like, oh, well, okay, we win too.
It's a win-win.
So it is what it is. And ultimately, I do hope the company comes, but it was a business decision for them. But I think our community saw the impact it could have on all businesses should you want to expand. And
I think we've got, as opportunities continue to arise in the state, value-added agriculture being our number one industry, we have to continue to push, because I think a lot of people say, well, we have it good today, but what does that look like in 10 years? And what are the states around us doing? And we've got to remain competitive, and we've got to provide opportunities for the next generation, all of that stuff. And so change is hard, but I think we've got to continue to push for it. We've got to continue to give our number one industry.
Innovate and be forward thinking. When we talk about fuels, I don't want to get into that issue, but when we talk about aviation and the fuels, Dusty Johnson's leading a caucus on what that could look like. We want to be sustainable in a lot of different ways, and so how can we make an impact that's positive? And boy, this aviation fuel is an exciting time, I think, for our state and the nation, for what they can do. They certainly have some challenges in front of them, but we just don't want to be looking back going, ooh, I wish we would have done this differently. So that will be another topic. I'm sure another day coming up. So talk to me a little bit more about Lawrence Schiller, as far as the importance of PR and sharing a story. I mean, what does it mean? So many times associations, we're not always great at sharing our story of what happens. And I think the statistic is one bad incident, you need about five stories to repair a bad story or something like that.
I've heard some of that stuff. I think so. What we always kind of tell clients, or what I tell folks when we first sit down to talk in a lot of initial discussions, is we're so South Dakota nice, and we're modest, and we don't like to tell our story. But the truth is, if you're not telling your story, somebody else is. And so what message do you want to get out there? And there's so many different ways to tell your message today, whether that, just to step back for a second. So we kind of do two tracks at LNS when it comes to getting messages out there. So the first one would be like your traditional paid media or ad. And so that is TV commercial, that is Facebook ad, newspaper ad, any of that kind of stuff. That's a paid media tactic. The other side is earned media or PR. And so that's more of, how can we get coverage on this story? Maybe that's an email, maybe that's a organic social post, that kind of stuff. And so those are sort of the two lenses in which we look at getting a message out there. And so it doesn't just have to be paid media. It doesn't just have to be, a 30-second TV spot or a radio spot. It can be hosting an event. It can be sending out a press release or doing any of that kind of stuff. And I think, for some of that, you don't need a large staff. You just need ideas to generate sort of some publicity or some coverage in ways that are different and unique. Because I think, whether it's the Dakota Scout, whether it's Kello, a lot of the West River publications, they're all looking for content. They're all looking for stories. They want to tell South Dakota stories. And so I think it's important for businesses and organizations to continue to try to tell their story and to be out front and know that if they're not doing it, somebody else is telling that story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, like I said, we're not always great at doing that. And, we recently, the last year, Trevor Johnson, who runs all of our media stuff and podcasts, we hired a communications and marketing person just 1 year ago and didn't have that. And, his role is evolving and focusing on a lot of different stuff, but we have a higher social media presence. Our, documents and our events are, step up our game a little bit instead of, a sign-in sheet, and that's an exaggeration, of course, but it's taking our events and all of that to the next level of what our publications look like. And we have a fantastic graphic designer here on staff as well. I know she's helped do a lot of different things for our members and design. And so the communications and that graphic design really are two unique areas. And I know you guys have those people on staff too, but critical roles for us in our association for sure.
Well, you nailed it too. I think most often people think about how can I get my message out there, and whether it's marketing communications in an organization. There's also the how do we speak internally and how do we speak to our membership? Because I think a lot of people forget those are your biggest advocates. Those are your storytellers. That's an outlet that we should be using more. And so I think member communication is incredibly important and something I think people miss out a lot on. And so I think the way that you've elevated that, the way you continue to communicate, but you think about, workforce development has been such a huge issue in South Dakota over the last, it just feels like since I've been out of college, it's been an issue.
Which was just yesterday.
Which was a long time ago. But it is like we've got 3% unemployment or, less than that or a little bit more than that, depending on what year. But as people talk about how do we recruit, it's like, well, use your members to help continue to get the word out there. And so much of what we do is trying to help companies or organizations communicate both broadly, but also with membership.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something. So when I first started, fun fact for you, we didn't have Constant Contact. We used
just Outlet or Google, really?
Google. And so we had our emails in there. And so it maxes out at 50 or 100 or something like that. And so you have to make sure you put it in the BCC because you don't want to share everybody's emails. And then all of a sudden you get these reply alls and out of office. So we would put 50 in, we'd do it again, do 50 more. And I'm like, what are we doing? There's got to be an easier way that's more efficient
100%
to communicate to. So,
and I think we're at a spot today where there are tools like that exist. They're all, if they're not free, they're not very expensive.
Right.
And so organizations, while we love when companies come to us and we want them to hire us, at the same time, there are more tools and options out there today to tell stories and to get a message out than there ever have been. And if companies aren't doing it or organizations aren't doing it, shame on them.
Right, yeah. And I'll just segue for one hot second. So if any of our listeners are listening in right now, if you have stories, if you have events, let us know. We want to share your story. We want to be we'll send a staff there, but we want to share what we're doing in the community because these are the people that are, the donating to the high school football team, that are sponsoring the fair, that are, the list goes on and on and on, the backpack program.
In every community across the state.
Every community across the state. And I think you hit it head on when you said, well, we're South Dakota nice. We don't like to, pat ourselves on the back and toot our own horns and say, hey, look what I did.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, if you share it with us, we will say, look what they did.
Correct.
And it's so much easier. I mean, I was elected for 10 years.
A long time, yeah.
And, that when we were talking about the other campaigns, it was easier for me to talk about somebody else's issue than it was myself.
Yeah.
To say, hey, look what I accomplished versus let's tell the story of XYZ. And so I just share that with our listeners is tell us what you got going on. We want to come there. We want to promote it. We want to be a part of it and share your story. We can say how great you are and you don't have to.
And the community wants to know that too.
They do.
So
They do. And, sometimes I think especially the trucking and automotive industry gets a bad rap sometimes because, you get stuck behind a truck when the weather's not great.
Sure.
Look, it's scary for everybody.
Rock chip or something.
Yeah, a rock chip and this and that. And, sometimes the car buying process can be long and tedious and people can get frustrated. I mean, I like buying a car via text. I text my sales guy and say, here's the 3 cars I want. If you got them in, let me know. I'll test test drive them, I'll let you know in an
Yep.
hour.
Yep.
I mean, I just busy life, right? That's just what I've done my research. Now I'm just ready to ink it. And so if we can share the benefits and the positives and all the things that people are doing, I think it's so important.
Agreed.
And that's what you guys specialize
Agreed.
in a lot. So
Yep.
as I know a lot of our members have utilized your guys' services as well over the years. But we can do it on an association front
for sure.
too,
and you know this hopefully about me. If there are any questions anybody ever had or wanted advice on how to do it, there's no charge for any of that. We're going to help out, and we want everybody to win. And whether that's your guys' organization or anybody else that is looking to step it up a little bit and needs advice, we're always willing to help. So, I am.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So are you guys growing? Are you looking at expanding? Are you?
So we are, in the nearly 50 years, we've had an office out in Deadwood from time to time. We've had an office. I think we had an office in Sioux City at one point. We've been up in Minneapolis, I think probably 5 years.
Wow.
We've shared an office space with a PR partner up there up until last year. And then actually next week, the 26th of June, we're having our grand opening. We've got a new office space up in Minneapolis. We've got 4 people up there today. We probably have room for a dozen. We'll continue. We do work with Duluth, the city of Duluth, tourism. We've got a few other clients up in the cities. We'll look to continue to grow up there, but we also got some clients in Montana, and then continue to grow in South Dakota. So we're on pace for a great year. We're continuing to grow. Things are great there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I like it. As far as when we talk PR, and maybe we don't want to go down this road or not, but, we, no specific examples, but just speaking high level, somebody kind of steps in their own way in PR. Yep. What's the best way to get out of it? I mean, hire you or what advice do you have in those regards?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing to always sort of keep in mind in any of those situations is how do you make sure that you don't turn a 1-day story into a 3-day story?
Oh, yeah.
So don't make it worse. Less is more in any of these scenarios. I would absolutely not double down. I would absolutely not try to continue to put out statements. Take a step back first and foremost. From there, I think it's important. We talked about like messaging to constituency. I think it's very important who is going to be most impacted by whatever situation just happened, and who's going to be. What's the worst case scenario? Say you're an association that's representing an industry, and you're really worried about whatever just happened, and that could impact the legislature and whether you're going to get money or whether they'll see you unfavorably. So they're the constituency here.
Right.
They're the most important ones that need to know the truth or need to be communicated with. And so take a step back, don't make it worse publicly, but then make sure you're communicating with that constituency. So if something happened, you'd put an email together, you'd send it out to the legislature, it'd be very matter of fact, and you'd say, here's the situation.
Here's the facts.
And be honest, be forthright, but make sure you're communicating with them. And so I think those are the two biggest things. There's not every situation's unique.
Very much.
So there's not a playbook for everyone, but I would say 9 times out of 10, those two sort of key principles of don't make it worse, don't double down publicly, and then make sure you're communicating pretty quickly with whatever constituency is the most important. If you do those two things, I think most often you'll be fine.
Yeah. And it's very strategic, right?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's very scripted.
Yep.
I would say sometimes too
Yep.
is, I think sometimes what I have seen folks get themselves in trouble is when they, ad lib, or if somebody asks them a question that they maybe don't have the answer for and they try to make up one instead of saying, you know what? I don't have the answer for you today, and I'm going to get back to you. There's no harm in that, in my opinion, because I don't like a know-it-all. Yeah. So let's go back to the drawing board, maybe research a little bit. And I think most journalists and folks are generally pretty forgiving with that time and saying, geez, I want to give you a good answer, but can you give me just,
Oh, I agree. It's funny. I sit over here and, John Pullman is partner at Lawrence Schiller, and he's sort of the creative mind behind a lot of the campaigns that we work on. And he was the head of creative. Now he's the chairman of the board. He says, make sure you take your off ramp. And so I think about like working with Alex Jensen and some other candidates. And as I sit over here, I've had to tell myself a couple of times as I just keep talking to talk, take the off ramp. And so often people just try to continue to talk, and that's where you continue to dig yourself a hole. And it's like, no, just say what you need to say and then stop. But I think I just thought that was kind of funny as I sit here and just continue to talk, take your off ramp. And then the second piece.
Nobody likes silence. So you feel like you have to feel like, oh, we have a little low, so I better say something smart. And sometimes it's not smart. And
And then I think you're 100% right. Like I always love the quote, like, I reserve the right to be smarter today than I was yesterday. And I also think it's important. You can absolutely say to somebody, I don't have an answer for that. Yeah. Let me get back to you. And that is so much better than if people can tell you don't have an answer or you'll dig yourself a hole. Absolutely, you're 100% right. Just I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Always your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My always rule when I was in politics to not be surprised is if I didn't have your phone number programmed into my phone, it went to voicemail.
Yep.
That was just my kind of standard rule. Yep. And then I would always call you back and get back to you right away, but I didn't want to be surprised. And I think that there was value in me being thoughtful with my response and being mindful of collecting my thoughts. Yeah. And no one says you have to say it right now.
No.
You just don't.
No.
It's
just, if you've got an opportunity to say, I mean, if I was talking to a candidate or if I was talking to a business who was in a situation, the reporter's going to reach out. They're going to say, hey, can you give us a quote on this? I'm going to say, what's your question? And then I'm say, okay, I will text you or email you a response. Yes. When do you need it? And so that always gives you an opportunity to go back and make sure that you're saying exactly what you want to say and that they're getting exactly what you want them to get.
I have done that often because I wanted it verbatim of what I said. Because like we said, when you talk and talk and talk, a lot of times when you do TV interviews or even newspaper, you might talk for 3.5 minutes, but that clip is about 8 seconds.
Yep.
So what point do you want to hammer home?
Yep.
What do you want the people to know? Because that journalist may not be the expert that you are. And the next thing you know, you're talking about a certain...
It's completely off topic or it's different than what you had intended. And it's much easier to just say, I will email you a response, give me an hour. And I don't know that I've ever run into an issue with that. I don't know that I've ever run into a reporter or a station that has said, no, give it to me right now.
So, right. Unless you don't call them back, then
then
so-and-so did not respond for comment. And I have
there's strategy to that too.
I have done that when I was actually traveling and didn't have my phone. And so by the time that the story aired, it said, didn't respond. And I was like, oh no, it was a timing thing.
And that'll happen. And sometimes no comment is
your
the
comment.
Best comment.
Yeah. No comment is your comment.
Yeah. Not a majority of the time, but we've done that from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. It's good. I've had a couple opportunities to lead discussions and communication events with other state execs and doing like the across the table kind of interview and doing those things. And just with my political background, it's been fun helping some other state execs kind of walk through the process that maybe are a little green and hearing maybe their strategy of, well, I never take an interview. And I'm like, oh no.
You're missing the opportunity.
Now you're missing an opportunity and you're also at the mercy of whatever they want to print. Those relationships are so important.
And your membership deserves more on that. I mean, they
Absolutely.
deserve somebody who's going to be at the table and who's willing to be an advocate and who's
Yeah.
going to get their message out. So.
Yeah, I've never been one that was scared of my shadow.
No.
So I usually am just, hey, yeah, well, here it is. I think probably the criticism I've gotten more is, and I think it's a benefit, is you always know where you stand with Christine.
Correct.
You may not agree with me, but you know where I stand, and I will give you the reason behind. And in my time in politics, I had a lot of tough votes, and boy, there was some people that didn't like my vote when we go back to the whole COVID thing. But you knew why and where I stood.
Yeah.
And that was always something I try to do. And that's the importance and value of that forward-facing PR and, what you guys do too.
And I think that is what has sort of benefited you in both politics and in the role that you're in currently is, we talked about it kind of at the beginning, but it's a lot easier to rein somebody in than it is to get them to get comfortable being in front of whether that is the legislature or the city council or membership or any of that kind of stuff. And so I think you've always had a willingness to be out front, and I think it serves your membership well. The
toughest group that I've spoke to in this industry and politics both are kids.
Oh.
They are brutal sometimes. I mean, because they know no bounds.
Yeah.
And so it's those I try to do a few times a year because we're talking workforce, we're talking about those things. But I try to do that because it's challenging.
Yeah. And weirdly, the most nervous I've ever been is in front of, a group of high schoolers or college kids. They are. I don't know why that is. I don't know if they're more difficult questions, if they're judged differently, if you don't know if you're connecting with them, or I have no idea. But for me, that's a lot harder group to talk to than
it's tough.
The Rotary crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because those are usually colleagues and friends versus some of the other
like-minded
students.
Folks and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, I don't have a whole lot more.
You were going to ask me about my uncle who's a truck driver.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love this because I forgot. I did an interview a few days ago, and I always, as I'm doing it, I'm like, all right, what connections do you have to auto and trucking?
Yeah.
And talk about that. And your uncle was a truck driver.
Yeah. So it was funny because when we were talking about giving back to the community, I was thinking about this because, again, I'm from Belfouche. For those that don't know where Belfouche is, it's
far away,
as close to Wyoming as you can get.
Pretty much, yeah.
But so my grandparents had 10 kids.
Wow.
My second oldest uncle Les went to college at St. John's, came back, and I'm convinced that he was in the trucking industry for at least 50 years. I bet he still has a truck today. But what was cool is I think he hauled livestock, primarily cattle, primarily sheep. But he would, every year, Belfouche has the Black Hills Roundup, the big rodeo, carnival, all that stuff on the 4th of July. And the coolest thing for me as a kid growing up was my uncle, his trucks would always pull the Belfouche Cowboy Band. And so through my entire childhood, I'd either jump in the truck with him, just kind of hang out in the cab and play around the sleeper and whatever, while the band was playing, or I'd ride on the back, the trailer with the band, which was just awesome. It's kind of we're proud of the band in Belfouche. It's this old cowboy band, red shirts and white chaps and all that. But that was, I'm sure my uncle gave back in other ways, but that was one that I just...
But as a kid,
for
that's
20
fun.
Years,
I mean, everybody was watching you go by going, how did he get in there?
Honking as often as he can.
Yeah, throwing candy. And
Budmayr trucking on the side. And so that was really cool. But no, I know, he was in the industry, and again, probably still hauls to this day. But no, grew up around it and loved it, and that industry, and certainly the ranch industry, egg industry, it is kind of in all of our blood, I think, in South Dakota in a way that is connecting with your industry and all that. So.
Oh, I love it. I love the connection. I always have to find some sort of connection with it. And I was surprised to learn that when we were chit-chatting about it. And that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, I appreciate you being on our podcast.
This was fun. Thank you.
We'll have you again. We'll probably talk maybe elections another time, and we'll dive into some of that. And I know there's some ballot issues and things of that sort.
It's going to be a busy year. Yeah.
It's a very busy year. Election years are always busy, and elections have consequences.
They do.
So
this one specifically.
It's very important for people to get out
Yeah.
and vote and make sure your industries are protected. That's for sure.
And you keep being the advocate that you are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this broadcast of Driveline Podcast with South Dakota Auto Dealers and South Dakota Trucking.